So I was watching or listening kind of initially I was listening to the Joe Rogan Experience, and he had a guy on by the name of Tim Kennedy, and Tim Kennedy's seems like Captain America. I mean, like, he's in the special forces. He's fought in the fought in the UFC. He's and he's also a part of this documentary series. He was one of the guys investigating, what happened to, Adolf Hitler, and kind of investigating, the claims that after that he had potentially fled to South America, and
for those of you not aware, there is a theory out there that that Hitler didn't really commit suicide and that he escaped on a U-boat to what is it? Was it Venezuela?
It was Argentina initially.
Argentina, that's right.
So I was like, well, that sounds interesting, and he's kind of talking about some of the the crazier things that they found on this investigation, and it's kind of funny because you hear those things and it seems kind of conspiratorial, and it's true that some of the higher level guys did kind of escape to Argentina, but it's like, it's like, yeah, like one or two are bound to have gotten out somehow. So that makes like potential sense. But as and this documentary series was over the course of 3 seasons of it, and I guess
it was a TV show, right?
Yeah, it was on the History Channel.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, they were searching through all these declassified documents of, after the war, and just trying to investigate it and see if, okay, let's dig into it. Let's see what's happening. And my God, I am convinced that based off of all the findings that they had, I mean, it wasn't. This to me wasn't like some bullshit. They weren't just kind of making things up. Like they went to these places and investigated, and I'm pretty convinced that not only did a lot of those the high ranking guys get out of there and pretty much start the Fourth Reich over in South America, but it seems plausible that Hitler probably didn't die in that bunker. In fact, he may not have even been in the bunker when the Soviets closed in. I've never seen so many it's like one of these crazy spy films where there's so many different redundancies and escape routes and plan B's and C's that these people had to escape, and all those escape networks work and how they can get out, because people
Hitler was really paranoid.
The crazy the other really crazy thing is how many networks of all these underground tunnels and caves that they built, and my God, and just stuff that you would not expect to see at all. That how much money and infrastructure that they built to not to escape. Like I said, they had all these contingency plans. I was looking at all this and I was completely blown away, and I feel like this is kind of the side of the war that we don't really hear about, and I think in a lot of ways it's where as the war is ending, I think the government wanted us to think that we've finished this. Hitler's gone, the Nazis are gone, and we have to we can move on as a country. We worked hard, we fought for liberty and freedom for not only the United States but for all of like Europe and
For the
everyone
world,
involved.
basically, for the world.
Yeah, and plus the it's like there's a new we had to face a new threat in communism, and so it's kind of like if we're still like looking behind us in the rearview mirror and thinking about Adolf Hitler, then we're not gonna be able to be as focused as a nation.
True.
But I feel like I kind of feel in a lot of ways maybe either I don't know if it was the government that like it was like, oh well, we'll just close the book and forget about it, but clearly not, because they were still investigating like many years later. But yeah, I kind of feel like a little bit like we're lied to about it, which is kind of a shame.
I mean,
Because
I wouldn't be so surprised because something that monumental, like finally getting Hitler. You would think that there'd be photos, like I mean, what was it? The Soviets that ultimately took Berlin, right?
yeah, it was they were the ones that like got into the bunker, and they. But the thing is, like the Soviets claimed that they had his body, but like no one saw this,
Right, yeah,
and
there were no pictures. Like, in like this was like such a big thing. You'd think that there'd be some pictures.
the skull that they had for all those years, it was a woman's skull. It wasn't a man's skull.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, maybe it was Eva Braun's, and they got it mixed up. That's a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, they couldn't really test that, because they did track down like one of the last surviving family members of Eva Braun.
Yeah, and they wouldn't submit
but
to the DNA test.
yeah, they weren't happy that they got found out, because they had changed their names and all this stuff, and they didn't want any part of it anymore, which
Right,
understandable.
yeah.
I think that.
I mean, it's much the same as Hitler's family. Like his aunt and like cousin or whatever. Like they're uh, they fled the country, and like they got to like as deep far in America as Chicago. And they changed their names because they didn't want to they didn't want that attention. They didn't want the stain of the name Hitler to be on them forever.
Yeah, and so it's just really wild how how it all. Here's the other crazy thing too is like the two things that I thought were really fascinating were, one, they were very, very close to developing nuclear weapons before the United States did. They were producing heavy water in Norway, and had pretty much were on the verge of getting nuclear weapons before the end of the war. And they were still, after a lot of these guys fled over to South America, they were rebuilding. They'd been transporting heavy water from that nuclear base in Norway through U-boats to South America, and had like kind of rebuilt their nuclear plant in I think it was Argentina that they were working on it. So there was that. That's a scary thought, and they were that was kind of going to be their their way to kind of attack the United States. So there was that. I think that was pretty intense. The other thing that was there was another escape route that that these guys had that fled towards south, towards like Austria, and like there's this kind of like tri-region area of like Austria, Italy, and Germany that these guys had fled to. And what was really scary is that the Catholic Church was complicit in helping these guys escape. they would rebaptize Nazis that were fleeing to them, to change their names, which would allow them to and this was happening at the time where, with their names changed and their identities changed, they went to the Red Cross and got these temporary passports so that they could escape to wherever they wanted, and so they just became regular refugees fleeing Europe after the war. And that's one of the ways that they escaped. I mean, and same thing in Spain. They had there was the Catholic Church in Spain was helping these guys too, and that's kind of wow. I couldn't believe that. That's pretty crazy.
That is pretty messed up.
And in some ways, it makes a little bit of sense in that, because in Europe it was, it was the Nazis and their fascism or communism, and unlike communists who would just outright destroy the Catholic Church and send those guys off to gulags and whatnot, at least the Nazis didn't just outright destroy churches as long as they were willing to support the state in a lot of ways. So a lot of them backed the Nazis, and that's why they were allowed to stand. And yeah, it was just so they ended up helping a lot of these guys get out of Germany and where fleeing Europe.
Right. But it makes you wonder though, how much of that was the church backing Nazis. How much was that more survival tactic as opposed to like oh yeah, killing the Jews? That sounds like a good idea. More like not an endorsement of Nazi ideology, but more of a survival tactic.
But but the thing is, the point that they were helping them at, the war is over.
This is the point where the war is over. Okay.
Yeah, the Germans are on the run. Like, I understand why doing it at the height of their power. That makes sense in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
But this is after the war, so that's why I'm saying that's the crazy part about it is they don't really have the power anymore. They're on the run, and yet they're helping them. Crazy stuff.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Just to what is it? Touching back on that Joe Rogan interview, they looked up that colony.
Colonia Dignidad.
Yeah, Colonia Dignidad, and at first I thought it was just gonna be some small buildings in the jungle or whatever, but when they showed it, I was amazed because it literally looked like it was one of those Bavarian
it looked like something out of The Sound of Music.
Yes, exactly. It was you couldn't tell the difference. If you said that was in South America, I wouldn't have believed you. It looked straight up like it was in Germany or the Bavarian countryside. With the architecture down to the T and the cobblestone streets and they literally transplanted an entire Bavarian village into South America.
Yeah, and that's, oh my gosh, it was. I was thinking that too. It's oh yeah, I thought it was just gonna be, maybe it's just some German refugees who kind of sort of made it there, and they had a couple, like I said, a couple.
Yeah, they took over some old Spanish style missions or something, but no, this is straight up. They lifted a portion of Germany, of Bavaria, and transplanted it into South America.
And the crazy thing is, all the stuff that they built there, for themselves, was very German.
Yeah, German-centric.
Everything was very German.
Yeah, German-centric.
Yeah, and I was blown away that there's all this stuff there.
And
to this day, everyone is very tight-lipped about it.
Right, and if you see the photos, like the brochure, uh, everyone is still like as white as paper.
Yeah, it's like they're still German.
Yeah, they're very much like still like all the dramatic like facial features, and some with like blonde hair, some with brown hair. Uh, but very European looking. Like there's no hint of cross pollination, as it were. Like no hint of like native Argentinian in the bunch of them.
Yeah, it was. I was just. I couldn't believe it, and that's why I was like, man, this is. Even like the guys that were that are kind of behind this investigation is like, this is what should have been done. This is the investigation that should have happened 70 years ago, and it's they're finding stuff, and there was all this secrecy and whatnot, and yeah, I'm just I can't say it enough. I'm blown away that it was happening like kind of underneath our noses,
Mm-hmm.
and that to this day it affects people still today. Yeah, I mean, you see the fear in people's eyes that were still alive, that were surviving from that time period, that were affected by this, and like they're like, no, I don't want to. Like there was one guy that they talked to, and there was, I guess, a seaplane that the Nazis had that were transporting people, that one of them had crashed, and like it was supposed to have not only held personnel, but potentially like gold and like other treasures that they were bringing over, and they were when they asked this guy, he's like, I don't want to talk about that. Like, so there was something there that like, and he's to this day, there's no Nazis for that we know of anymore, but like he didn't want to talk about it. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's how scared he was.
Right. Yeah.
Like even it's like, I mean, he even to like give the information that he was like he's like he felt like you could still see that he was like really scared about it, but like he reluctantly like uh, gave the information over.
Yeah, it's like one of those one of those spy movies where the informant's like he only said he says like 3 sentences. And he's like, oh, I've already said too much.
Like, and then there was another like scientist or like from like that area too that had a bunch of information, and but he wouldn't meet with them in like the city. He's like, no, we had to meet in like this part of like the jungle, and we had to do it at night because he didn't want to have people like he didn't want people's eyes on him.
Right.
That's
He didn't
like,
want to be
so
seen talking to the outsiders.
yeah, exactly. It's like, man, crazy stuff. And
Or,
I if you like learning about World War II, and this is I would suggest go watch this, because this is kind of an untold story of what happened like just after the war.
hmm.
It's like there's nothing definitive per se, like other than a few cases where we know certain people made it over there.
Right.
But the evidence, so you have to just kind of look at the evidence that's there, and there's enough evidence from that I think that everything of all these guys escaping over there, even potentially Hitler, I think it's all very, very plausible.
Mm.
If not, I mean, to be honest,
Yeah, if not Hitler, then for sure some Nazis did make it out.
I'm pretty convinced though that they did.
Mm.
Even I don't think Hitler died in that bunker. I'm going on a limb and saying I think that's very true.
Mm.
Just because he had so many of these other plans in place. So it doesn't make sense that he would commit suicide in that bunker.
Right, like that,
Um,
like because I mean, again, like they were like the Germans, they were so meticulous that they had plan, they had contingencies for contingencies. So
yeah, and so
so
I'm pretty convinced that what we think of from history wasn't actually true. Um, so yeah, but I encourage everyone go ahead and watch it. I think it's very for those history buffs out there that you like investigating stuff. This is a documentary for you.
yeah, yeah, I always found it interesting, like those alternative history things. Um, I mean, to relate it, in the first Hellboy movie, when uh, when the new agent is being introduced to the bureau, uh, for what was it, paranormal research and defense, and he was basically been the uh, Professor Broom. That's what it was like. Professor Broom like walks him through the vault of like all the little trinkets and things like that, and he points to the spear of Longinus, the supposed spear that pierced Christ, and he said like, oh, we found it in a bunker, in Germany, and then we basically fought Hitler for another like 5 years, and then he finally died in 1955, and then like the new agent was like, oh, 1940, like 1945, right? Hitler died in 45, and then like the professor kind of slyly is like, it's like, oh, did he?